Undercover black owner denied service at his own restaurant. 8 minutes later, he fired the manager. The thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline like a warning, but Marcus Langford paid it no mind as he stepped out of his modest Honda Civic. He'd deliberately chosen the oldest car in his collection tonight. Nothing flashy, nothing that would give him away. The worn leather jacket he'd pulled from the back of his closet smelled faintly of mothballs, and his favorite pair of faded jeans had seen better days. Perfect. Marcus stood across the street from Bella Vista, the upscale Italian restaurant he'd poured his heart and soul into for the past 3 years. Even in the gathering darkness, the warm golden light spilling from its windows made his chest swell with pride. This place was his dream realized, a testament to every sleepless night, every rejected loan application, every person who told him a kid from the South Side could never make it in fine dining. But lately, something had been eating at him. Customer complaints had been trickling in through online reviews and private messages. Stories that made his stomach churn. A young black couple claiming they'd been told there were no tables available, only to see empty seats through the window. A Hispanic family who said they'd been made to wait 45 minutes for a table, while others were seated immediately. An elderly black woman who'd saved up for months to celebrate her anniversary, only to be turned away at the door. Marcus had tried to dismiss these reports at first. Surely there were explanations, busy nights, reservation mix-ups, honest mistakes. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. And tonight, dressed like any other customer walking in off the street, he was going to find out the truth. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Marcus crossed the street, each one hitting the pavement with the sound of a small explosion. By the time he reached the restaurant's ornate front door, the sky had opened up completely. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the sidewalk into a river and soaking through his windbreaker within seconds. He pushed open the heavy glass door, eager for the warmth and comfort he'd designed this place to provide. The familiar scent of garlic and fresh basil wrapped around him like an embrace, and for a moment, he almost forgot why he was here. The soft jazz playing in the background, the elegant Edison bulb fixtures he'd personally selected, the exposed brick walls that had taken months to restore, everything was exactly as he'd envisioned. But before Marcus could take more than 2 steps inside, a figure appeared in front of him like a wall. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was smooth, professional, but there was something cold underneath it. Marcus looked up to see Dennis Rodriguez, his restaurant manager, blocking his path with what could generously be called a smile. It was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes, the kind that said customer service while meaning something else entirely. Marcus had hired Dennis 18 months ago after an exhaustive search. The man had impeccable credentials, 10 years of experience at some of Chicago's finest establishments, glowing references, and an impressive knowledge of wine and cuisine. During the interview, Dennis had spoken passionately about creating an inclusive dining experience, about making every guest feel welcome. It was exactly what Marcus had wanted to hear. "I'm sorry," Dennis continued, his smile growing wider and somehow less genuine. "But I'm afraid we're closed tonight for a private event." Marcus blinked, water still dripping from his hair onto the polished marble floor. Through the dining room archway behind Dennis, he could clearly see at least a dozen tables, maybe more. Some were occupied by couples enjoying intimate dinners, others by small groups laughing over wine and pasta. The soft clink of silverware against plates, and the gentle murmur of conversation filled the air. Servers moved gracefully between tables, refilling glasses and taking orders. "A private event?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. He gestured toward the dining room. "It looks like you have plenty of space available." Dennis's laugh was sharp and brief. "I know how it appears, but we've reserved the entire restaurant for a very important client tonight. Corporate dinner, you understand. Very exclusive." He leaned forward conspiratorially, as if sharing a secret. "Between you and me, we probably couldn't have accommodated you anyway. Kitchen's backed up, waitlist is through the roof. You'd be looking at least a 2-hour wait minimum." The lie rolled off Dennis's tongue so smoothly that Marcus almost admired the craftsmanship of it. Almost. He glanced again at the dining room, doing a quick mental count. Maybe 25 guests total in a restaurant that could seat 90. If this was a private event, it was the smallest, most spread-out corporate dinner in history. "Are you sure there isn't anything?" Marcus began, but Dennis was already stepping closer, using his body to gently but firmly guide Marcus back toward the door. "I really am sorry, sir. Maybe try calling ahead next time? We could put you on our wait list for next week." Dennis's hand was now resting on the door handle, ready to usher Marcus back into the storm. "There's a great little pizza place about 6 blocks down. Much more suitable for a night like this." The word suitable hung in the air between them like smoke. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with his rain-soaked clothes. He looked into Dennis's eyes and saw something he recognized from 1,000 small moments throughout his life, that particular mixture of disdain and dismissal that some people reserved for those they considered beneath them. "Right," Marcus said quietly. "Of course. Thanks for the suggestion." He turned and walked back into the rain, his hands clenched into fists inside his jacket pockets. The storm had intensified, turning the night into a wall of water and wind. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the streets in stark black and white. But Marcus didn't head to his car. Instead, he ducked under the awning of a closed boutique across the street, pulling out his phone as if calling for a ride. From this vantage point, he had a perfect view of Bella Vista's entrance, and more importantly, he could see inside through the large front windows. He'd built this restaurant to be a beacon of hospitality, a place where everyone could feel welcome regardless of their background or the size of their wallet. Looking at it now through the rain-streaked window, it looked exactly like what he dreamed of: warm, inviting, successful. So why did he feel like he was looking at a stranger's business? Marcus pulled his hood up against the rain and settled in to wait. Whatever was really happening in his restaurant, he was going to find out. Even if it took all night. Even if what he discovered broke his heart. The storm raged on, but Marcus Langford wasn't going anywhere. Marcus had been standing under the boutique awning for exactly 7 minutes when he saw the first crack in Dennis's elaborate lie. A sleek black BMW pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. A couple emerged, the woman in a designer coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, the man in a tailored suit that screamed money. They hurried toward Bella Vista's entrance, clearly unprepared for the sudden downpour. Marcus watched as Dennis greeted them at the door with the same professional smile he'd given him. But this time, something was different. The conversation was brief, maybe 30 seconds, and Marcus could see the man reaching into his jacket pocket. Not for a wallet or credit card, but for something smaller. Cash, Marcus realized with growing unease. A folded bundle of bills that disappeared into Dennis's palms so quickly that anyone not watching carefully would have missed it entirely. Suddenly, the private event evaporated like morning mist. Dennis's posture changed, his smile became genuine, and he ushered the couple inside with the kind of warm hospitality that Marcus had trained all his staff to provide. Through the window, Marcus watched as they were seated immediately at one of the best tables in the house, a corner booth with a perfect view of the city lights. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered under his breath, his phone forgotten in his hand. The rain continued to pound the pavement around him, each drop seeming to echo the growing rhythm of his heartbeat. He told himself to stay calm, to think rationally. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe the couple had a standing reservation that Dennis had forgotten about. Maybe. Another car pulled up. This time it was a silver Mercedes, and 2 businessmen in expensive overcoats stepped out. They looked like they'd come straight from a board meeting, all confidence and corporate polish. Marcus watched the same dance play out again, the brief conversation, the discreet handoff, the sudden transformation of Dennis from gatekeeper to gracious host. "No way," Marcus whispered, pressing closer to the window despite the rain beginning to seep through his jacket. "This cannot be happening at my restaurant." But it was happening. And now that Marcus knew what to look for, he couldn't unsee it. Over the next 10 minutes, he witnessed the ugly system in all its shameful glory. A young couple, both clearly nervous and excited, probably on their first real date at an upscale restaurant, approached the door. Marcus could see them checking their phones, likely confirming their reservation. But Dennis met them with the same story he'd given Marcus. Private event, completely booked, maybe try calling ahead next time. The disappointment on their faces was heartbreaking. The girl had dressed up for the occasion, her hair carefully styled despite the rain. The boy kept apologizing, as if it were somehow his fault that they'd been turned away. They walked back to their beat-up Honda Civic, shoulders slumped, their special evening ruined. Not 5 minutes later, an older gentleman in a cashmere coat approached the door. No reservation, no phone call. Marcus could tell from his casual approach that this was a walk-in. But once again, the familiar ritual played out. Cash changed hands, and the man was welcomed inside like an old friend. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. This wasn't about reservations or private events or kitchen capacity. This was about money. Cold, simple greed that turned his restaurant's front door into an auction block where dignity and decency were sold to the highest bidder. Marcus felt his hands shaking, and it wasn't from the cold rain soaking through his clothes. This was his restaurant, his dream, his reputation being prostituted for pocket change. Every time Dennis pocketed those bills, he was stealing more than money. He was stealing the very soul of what Bella Vista was supposed to represent. A woman with a stroller appeared through the rain, moving slowly to protect her sleeping baby from the weather. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from working double shifts and counting every dollar. When she reached the door, Marcus could see her taking a deep breath, gathering her courage for what was probably a rare treat, maybe a birthday dinner or a celebration she'd saved up for months to afford. Dennis's rejection was swift and merciless. "Completely full tonight, ma'am. Kitchen's backed up. You might want to try somewhere more family-friendly." The woman's face crumpled slightly, but she nodded with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to disappointment. As she turned to leave, struggling with the stroller in the rain, another figure approached the restaurant. An older man in an expensive suit strode up to the door like he owned the place. No hesitation, no nervous energy, just pure entitlement. The transaction took less than 15 seconds. Money changed hands, and he was inside before the woman with the stroller had even reached the sidewalk. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling sick to his stomach. He'd built Bella Vista to be a place where everyone could feel welcome, where a family celebrating a graduation held the same value as a corporate executive closing a deal. But Dennis had turned it into something ugly, something that went against everything Marcus believed in. When he opened his eyes again, his phone was buzzing with a text message. But Marcus barely noticed. His mind was racing, calculating not just the money Dennis was stealing, but the damage being done to his restaurant's reputation, to his community, to his own soul. This ended tonight. The next 20 minutes felt like watching a master class in systematic discrimination, and Marcus was the unwilling student taking notes in the rain. A Hispanic family of 4 approached the restaurant, the parents clearly nervous but excited. Marcus could see the father adjusting his tie, probably the nicest one he owned, while the mother smoothed down her daughter's dress. The little girl couldn't have been more than 8, skipping ahead with the pure joy that comes from a special family dinner. Her younger brother held tight to his mother's hand, eyes wide with anticipation. Dennis met them at the door with practiced efficiency. Marcus couldn't hear the words from across the street, but he didn't need to. The body language told the entire story. Dennis's arms crossed defensively, his head shaking with mock sympathy. The father pulled out his phone, likely showing their reservation confirmation, but Dennis waved it away dismissively. "Private event." Marcus mouthed along with Dennis, the line now as familiar as his own name. The family's disappointment was devastating to watch. The little girl's face fell as her parents explained they couldn't eat there tonight. She tugged on her father's jacket, asking questions that made the man's shoulders sag with shame. They walked away slowly, the father's arm around his wife's shoulders, both parents trying to hide their humiliation from their children. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. That could have been his own family when he was growing up. His parents had saved for weeks to take him and his sister to a nice restaurant for his 8th grade graduation, only to be told there was a mix-up with their reservation. He remembered the look on his father's face, the same mixture of anger and powerlessness he was seeing now. Before the Hispanic family had even reached their car, a group of 3 white businessmen in expensive suits approached the restaurant. They moved with the casual confidence of men who had never been told no in their lives. Marcus watched the familiar transaction unfold, but this time it was different. These men didn't just slip Dennis a 20 or 2, one of them pulled out what looked like a $100 bill. Dennis's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. The men were immediately ushered inside and seated at the chef's table, the most exclusive spot in the entire restaurant, with a direct view of the open kitchen. Marcus had designed that table for special occasions, for customers celebrating anniversaries or closing major business deals. Now it was being sold to the highest bidder. A young black woman appeared next, probably in her mid-20s, wearing scrubs that suggested she just finished a long shift at the hospital. She looked exhausted but determined, clutching a small gift bag that made Marcus think she was meeting someone special. Maybe a first date, maybe celebrating a promotion, maybe just treating herself after a particularly hard week. Dennis didn't even let her fully approach the door. He stepped outside under the small awning, blocking her path while staying dry. The conversation was brief and brutal. Marcus could see the woman gesturing toward the nearly empty dining room visible through the windows, her voice rising with frustration and disbelief. But Dennis was immovable, his fake smile never wavering. As the woman walked away, her shoulders slumped with defeat, Marcus noticed something that made his blood boil. A couple of the businessmen inside were watching through the window, one of them actually pointing and laughing at her rejection. They raised their wine glasses in a mock toast, as if celebrating their exclusive access to what they clearly saw as their private club. The pattern continued with clockwork precision. An elderly black man in a worn but clean suit, the kind of man who had worked his whole life and was probably spending his social security check on a rare night out, was turned away with the usual lies. A young interracial couple was told the restaurant was closed for deep cleaning, despite the obvious dinner service happening inside. 2 Latina women who looked like they might be celebrating a birthday were dismissed before they could even state their business. But the wealthy continued to flow in like an exclusive parade. A woman in a fur coat handed Dennis what looked like a 50 and was immediately seated at a prime window table. A man in a Rolex and designer jeans slipped the manager something substantial and was given the VIP treatment, complete with the sommelier rushing over to discuss wine pairings. Marcus realized he was witnessing something far worse than simple corruption. This wasn't just about Dennis pocketing extra cash. This was about turning his restaurant into a symbol of everything he'd fought against his entire life. Every rejected family, every disappointed couple, every person made to feel unworthy was a betrayal of everything Bella Vista was supposed to represent. The rain continued to pour, but Marcus barely felt it anymore. His entire body was burning with a rage that no storm could cool. He thought about his grandmother, who had cleaned houses for wealthy families her entire life, always using the back entrance, always knowing her place. He thought about his parents, who had taught him that hard work and dignity mattered more than money. He thought about every person who had believed in his dream and helped him build this place. Dennis had turned their investment into something obscene. Marcus's phone buzzed against his chest, cutting through his fury like a knife. He fumbled for it with rain-slicked fingers, expecting to see a rideshare notification or maybe a spam call. Instead, he saw a name that made his heart skip: Sofia Morales. Sofia was his sous chef, a brilliant cook who had started as a line prep worker 2 years ago and earned her promotion through pure talent and dedication. More than that, she was one of the few people in the restaurant Marcus truly trusted, someone who shared his vision of what Bella Vista could be. If anyone would tell him the truth about what was happening inside his own restaurant, it would be Sofia. But Marcus hadn't texted Sofia. So why was she messaging him at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night? "Chef, you need to know what's happening here. Call me when you can. It's bad." Marcus's hands were shaking as he typed back, using the cover of the boutique awning to shield his phone from the rain. His fingers felt clumsy and thick as he struggled to find the right words. "Can't call right now. What's going on?" The response came back almost immediately, as if Sophia had been waiting by her phone. "Dennis told everyone you're out of town for the week. He's been running some kind of scam at the front door, taking money from customers to get tables. Staff is scared to say anything." Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Out of town for a week? He'd been in Chicago all day, had meetings scheduled for tomorrow, and hadn't told anyone he was traveling anywhere. Dennis had literally lied to the entire staff to cover his tracks. "How long has this been going on?" Marcus typed, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "Months. Maybe since the beginning of the year. It started small, just a few people here and they're paying extra for better tables. But now it's every night. Dennis calls it his VIP program when he talks to the servers. Says it's temporary, just to boost revenue during slow season." Marcus's mind raced. Slow season? Bella Vista had been consistently busy for over a year. There was no slow season, which meant Dennis's VIP program was pure profit skimming. Money that should have been going to the restaurant, to paying his staff better wages, to building the business, all of it disappearing into Dennis's pockets. "How much money are we talking about?" The pause before Sophia's response felt like an eternity. "Hundreds every night. Maybe more on weekends. Tommy from the bar says he saw Dennis counting at least $400 in cash during Sunday brunch alone. And that's just what he could see." Marcus did quick math in his head. If Dennis was pulling in $300 to $400 per night, 5 nights a week, that was potentially $80,000 a year in stolen revenue. But the money wasn't even the worst part, it was what that money represented. Every dollar Dennis pocketed was a family turned away, a couple's special night ruined, a community member made to feel unwelcome in their own neighborhood. "Why hasn't anyone reported this to me?" Sophia's response came back quickly, and Marcus could practically feel her fear through the screen. "He cuts shifts for anyone who causes problems. Maria asked too many questions about why we were turning away walk-ins when we had empty tables. Next week her schedule went from 35 hours to 15. People have bills to pay, chef. They can't afford to lose their jobs." The full scope of Dennis's operation was becoming clear, and it was worse than Marcus had imagined. This wasn't just theft, it was systematic intimidation. Dennis had created an environment where the staff was too terrified to speak up, where good employees were punished for having a conscience. Marcus thought about Maria, a single mother of 2 who worked as a server and always stayed late to help close. She was exactly the kind of employee he wanted to support and promote, not someone who should be living in fear of reduced hours for doing the right thing. "What about tonight specifically? Dennis told me there was a private event." "There's no private event. It's a normal Tuesday night. We're maybe 30% full. Dennis has been at the front door all evening turning people away and letting others in. The kitchen staff is confused because we keep getting orders for tables that supposedly don't exist." Marcus looked across the street at his restaurant, watching Dennis greet another well-dressed couple at the door. Even from this distance, he could see the familiar handshake, the discreet exchange, the immediate transformation from gatekeeper to host. "I need you to document everything you can tonight. Times, amounts if you can see them, which customers get turned away versus which ones get seated. Don't put yourself at risk, but keep track." "Already doing it, chef. I've been keeping notes for weeks, hoping I'd get a chance to talk to you. This place isn't what you built it to be." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for Sophia's loyalty, followed immediately by shame that she'd been carrying this burden alone while he remained oblivious. "One more question. Does Dennis know I'm in town?" "No idea. He told everyone you were visiting suppliers in California all week." "Why?" Marcus looked down at his rain-soaked clothes, his anonymous outfit that had allowed him to see the truth about his own business. For the first time all evening, he smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Because I'm about to surprise him." Marcus pocketed his phone and stepped back into the rain, But this time he wasn't heading to his car. Instead, he walked around the block to the narrow alley behind Bella Vista, where the staff entrance waited like a secret doorway into his own betrayal. The rain had turned the alley into a small river, with water rushing toward the storm drains in angry torrents. Marcus's sneakers splashed through puddles as he approached the unmarked steel door that led directly into the kitchen. He'd used this entrance countless times during construction, during late-night inventory sessions, during the early days when he'd worked 16-hour shifts to keep his dream alive. His key still worked. The kitchen hit him like a wall of heat and sound, sizzling pans, shouting cooks, the rhythmic chop of knives against cutting boards. The familiar chaos should have felt like coming home, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, Marcus was seeing his restaurant through the eyes of a stranger, and what he saw made his stomach turn. The kitchen staff didn't notice him at first. They were too busy with the dinner rush, too focused on their work to pay attention to another figure in wet clothes entering through the back door. Marcus pulled down his hood and stood there for a moment, water dripping onto the pristine tiles he'd personally selected. Then Sophia looked up from the grill. Her eyes went wide with shock, then immediately darted toward the door as if she expected Dennis to burst in at any moment. She mouthed, "What are you doing here?" But Marcus just held up a finger and pointed toward the dining room. It was time to end this. Marcus walked through the kitchen like a ghost, passing line cooks who did double takes when they recognized him. Carlos, his head chef, nearly dropped a pan of pasta when he spotted Marcus's familiar silhouette. The energy in the room shifted dramatically, conversation stopped mid-sentence, movements became more careful, and everyone seemed to hold their breath. "Keep working," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the authority that came from owning every plate, every pan, every paycheck in the room. "This has nothing to do with any of you." He pushed through the swinging doors that separated the kitchen from the dining room, and suddenly he was back in the world Dennis had created, the world where his restaurant had been turned into a private club for anyone with enough cash to buy their way past the velvet rope. The dining room was exactly as he'd seen it from across the street. Maybe 30 guests scattered across tables that could seat 90, all of them clearly wealthy, all of them blissfully unaware that their presence had been purchased with the dignity of others. The soft jazz continued to play, the Edison bulbs cast their warm glow, and the servers moved with the practiced grace he trained them to embody. It would have been perfect, if it hadn't been built on a foundation of systematic exclusion. Marcus walked directly toward the host stand, where Dennis was holding court with two men in expensive suits, the same businessmen who had paid their way to the chef's table earlier. They were laughing about something, drinks in hand, completely comfortable in their bought-and-paid-for sanctuary. "Told them we were booked solid," Dennis was saying, gesturing expansively with his wine glass. "You should have seen their faces. Like they actually expected to just walk in here without." "Without what, Dennis?" The voice cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a blade. Dennis's laugh died in his throat as he turned toward the sound, his face going through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally, pure terror. The two businessmen looked between Dennis and Marcus, clearly sensing the shift in atmosphere but not understanding its source. The nearest server, a young woman named Ashley, froze with a water pitcher in her hand. "Marcus?" Dennis's voice cracked slightly on the name. "I thought, you're supposed to be in California. The supplier meetings. Funny thing about those meetings," Marcus said, stepping closer to the host stand. His wet clothes left small puddles on the polished floor, and his simple jeans and windbreaker stood in stark contrast to the expensive outfits surrounding him. "They never existed." The color drained from Dennis's face. Behind him, Marcus could see other diners beginning to take notice of the confrontation. Conversations grew quieter, attention shifted toward the host stand, and the entire atmosphere of the restaurant began to change. "I can explain," Dennis began, but Marcus held up a hand. "Actually, you can't. Because I've been standing across the street for the past 30 minutes, watching you turn away families while you auction off tables to the highest bidder." Marcus's voice was calm, controlled, but everyone in earshot could hear the fury underneath it. "Would you like to explain why my restaurant is closed for a private event tonight, while half the tables are empty? Dennis's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The two businessmen suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "Sir, please, if we could discuss this privately." "No." Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping to the video he'd started recording 20 minutes earlier. "Let's discuss it right here, right now, in front of everyone whose money you've been taking." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade as every person in the restaurant turned their attention to the confrontation unfolding at the host's stand. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on him, but his focus remained laser-sharp on Dennis, who looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. "This video," Marcus said, holding up his phone so Dennis could see the screen, "shows you taking cash payments from customers while turning away others with lies about private events and full bookings. Would you like to watch it together?" Dennis's face had gone from pale to gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. "Marcus, please, I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like theft," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying clearly across the dining room. "It looks like discrimination. It looks like you've been running a side business using my restaurant as your personal ATM while destroying everything I've worked to build." One of the businessmen at the host's stand cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should leave you gentlemen to stay," Marcus said firmly, turning to address not just the businessmen but the entire dining room. "All of you, please stay. Because what happened here tonight affects every single person in this restaurant." He stepped onto the small platform where the host stand sat, elevating himself so everyone could see and hear him clearly. The restaurant had gone completely quiet except for the soft jazz still playing in the background, an absurdly cheerful soundtrack to the most serious moment in Bella Vista's history. "My name is Marcus Langford, and I own this restaurant," he began, his voice steady and strong. 30 minutes ago, I was denied service at my own establishment because I didn't look wealthy enough to deserve a table. I was told there was a private event, that the restaurant was fully booked, that I should try the pizza place down the street." Murmurs rippled through the dining room. Several customers looked confused, others embarrassed, and a few were starting to understand exactly what kind of system they had unknowingly participated in. "While I stood in the rain," Marcus continued, "I watched this man, my manager, someone I trusted, sell access to my restaurant like it was a private club. Cash payments for tables. Bribes for service. Systematic exclusion of anyone who couldn't or wouldn't pay extra." Dennis finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper. "It was just, we were trying to increase revenue. The profit margins were tight, and I thought." "You thought wrong." Marcus's words hit like a hammer blow. "You didn't increase revenue. You stole it. Every dollar you pocketed was money that belonged to this restaurant, to the staff, to the community we serve." He turned back to the dining room, his eyes sweeping across the faces of customers who were beginning to realize they had been unwitting participants in something ugly. Tonight, families were turned away from this restaurant. A young couple on their first fancy date. A healthcare worker celebrating after a long shift. An elderly man who probably saved up for weeks to afford dinner here. A mother with her children. All of them were told they weren't good enough, weren't worthy, couldn't be accommodated. The shame in the room was palpable. Several customers were staring down at their plates, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "Dennis Rodriguez," Marcus said, turning back to his manager with the full weight of his authority. "You're fired. Security will escort you out, and you have until tomorrow morning to remove your personal belongings. Any attempt to contact staff members or return to this property will result in legal action." Dennis's legs seemed to give out slightly. He gripped the edge of the host stand for support. "Please, Marcus, I have a mortgage, I have kids. You should have thought about that before you turned my restaurant into your personal discrimination machine." As if summoned by Marcus's words, Carlos appeared from the kitchen, flanked by two of the Belias line cooks. They didn't say anything, but their message was clear. Dennis looked around the room one last time, perhaps hoping for support or sympathy, but found only disappointed faces and averted eyes. "This isn't over," Dennis muttered as he gathered his jacket from behind the host's stand. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied simply. As Dennis was escorted toward the back exit, Marcus turned to address his remaining customers. But before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Sophia emerged from the kitchen, still wearing her chef's coat, and began to clap. Slowly, deliberately, her applause echoed through the silent restaurant. Then Carlos joined her. Then Ashley, the young server. Then the busboy, the bartender, and one by one, every member of the staff appeared from the kitchen and service areas, applauding their owner's courage to do what they hadn't been able to do themselves. The sound filled the restaurant like thunder, washing away the ugly tension that had dominated the evening and replacing it with something Marcus hadn't expected: hope. When the applause finally died down, Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn all night. "Now," he said, "let's talk about making this right."